over 9 million Jews lived in Europe in 1933. In the ensuing decade, Nazi Germany would drive Europe and the world into a war that proved to be history's most destructive, claiming 15 to 20 million European lives and as many as 60 million lives around the world. The Jews of Europe, however, faced far more than collateral losses. The Germans and their collaborators applied a program of deliberate genocide known as the Holocaust, referred to under Nazi policy as the final solution, with the goal of murdering every last Jew in the continent. By the time Germany surrendered to the Allied forces in 1945, only a third of Europe's Jews remained alive.
In the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg, the people of the world came together, for there sat the International Military Tribunal to judge the chief Nazi war criminals.
Following the war, 12 high-ranking Nazi officials were prosecuted for, among other charges, the unfathomable crimes of the Holocaust. The defendants mostly admitted to the heinous charges. However, they offered a defense. They claimed that they could not be held responsible for the actions they committed because they simply followed the orders of higher authorities in the Nazi chain of command.
Ich habe geirrt, war nicht imstande zu verhindern, was hätte verhindert werden müssen.
They argued that their fingers indeed handled triggers, whips, nooses, scalpels, flamethrowers, and poison gas canisters against countless innocent Jewish men, women, and children. But these actions, they claimed, were committed purely out of duty. They were obeying their commanders and superiors. The decisions were not of their making. They cast the blame on their superiors and on the now dead Adolf Hitler. And therefore, the defendants argued, their patriotic hands must be considered clean.
Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage nicht schuldig. Nicht schuldig. Nicht schuldig. Ich bekenne mich im Sinne der Anklage als nicht schuldig.
In Jerusalem, the trial of Adolf Eichmann begins, reviving memories of the Nazi horrors of the Second World War. Entering the bulletproof prisoner's box is the man charged with the annihilation of millions of Jews in Nazi death camps.
Adolf Eichmann, one of the major organizers of the Holocaust, was captured by the Mossad and then tried by Israel in 1961. The trial was a sensational event, closely watched around the world.
The accused, together with others, during the period 1939 to 1945, caused the killing of millions of Jews in his capacity as the person responsible for the execution of the Nazi plan for the physical extermination of the Jews, known as the final solution of the Jewish problem.
Eichmann followed the failed legal strategy of his colleagues who were tried in Nuremberg more than a decade earlier.
Ich bedauere und verurteile.
I have regret and condemnation to this extermination of the Jewish people, which was ordered by the German rulers, but I was a tool in the hands of the strong and the powerful, and in the hands of fate itself.
Back in the United States, social psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to explore the psychological aspect of these justifications. For Milgram, this question was personal. Although his parents fled Europe during World War I, many of his relatives that had remained died in the Holocaust. During Milgram's professorship at Yale in the 1960s, he conducted an experiment to examine the Nazis' obedience defense, that they were simply following orders. Milgram advertised for participants to take part in experimental sessions at Yale University, ostensibly to study the effects of punishment on a subject's ability to memorize content. At each session, there were to be 3 individuals. One was a researcher who oversaw the experiment on behalf of Milgram. The second was a random participant from the public. The third pretended to be a random participant, but was in fact one of Milgram's associates. The associate had electrodes attached to his arms, which appeared to be attached to a live current.
This electrode is connected to the shock generator in the next room.
The researcher then led the public participant into an adjacent room which was outfitted with an electric shock generator and a row of switches marked with increasing voltages, beginning with a slight 15 volts jolt and creeping up to a dangerous 100 volts before climaxing at a potentially deadly 450 volts. Although they were in separate rooms, the individuals could hear each other. The researcher then provided the public participant with a series of questions to pose to the associate.
Attention, learner, your teacher is about to begin the test. Try and remember the word pairs.
Sad, face, music, clown, girl.
For each incorrect answer, the participant was instructed to administer an electric shock to the associate, increasing the voltage each time.
Wrong. It's hair. 75 volts, Jim.
On his end, the associate was not attached to live wires at all, but he pretended to receive the shocks, yelping in fake pain.
150 volts.
Pounding on the walls as the voltage supposedly increased, complaining of heart pains.
This one will be 195 volts. The correct one.
Let me out of here.
Slow. Dance.
Get me out of here. My heart's bothering me.
Before falling terrifyingly silent.
Knife, stick, word, arrow. Answer, please.
See, all right in there? I didn't hear nothing.
Continue, please.
The answer is arrow. 360 volts.
Something's happened to him. I don't hear nothing.
If at any stage the public participant refused to continue administering electric shocks, the researcher issued verbal prods, encouraging or ordering him to continue. There were 4 prearranged prods to be used in the following order.
Please continue. The experiment requires that we continue.
It's absolutely essential that you continue. You had no other choice, teacher.
White, cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer, please.
Before conducting his experiment, Milgram surveyed 14 senior year psychology majors, 40 medical school psychiatrists, his own colleagues, as well as prominent others to predict his experiment's results. They unanimously predicted that very few participants would allow themselves to administer more than a strong shock, and hardly any at all would administer the deadliest voltages. They were wrong. Milgram found that 65% of participants responded to the prompts by continuing to administer shocks, reaching the very highest level of 450 volts. In other words, 2/3 of the members of the public participating in the experiment knowingly delivered what they believed could be a death blow to an individual who had already ceased screaming and had fallen silent. Not only that, but all participants continued to at least 300 volts. Milgram conducted over 18 variations of this study, all of which confirmed his results. He concluded that ordinary people are likely to follow orders given by an authority figure, even to the extent of killing an innocent human being.
A substantial proportion of people do what they are told to do, irrespective of the content of the act and without limitations of conscience, so long as they perceive that the command comes from a legitimate authority.
The results came as a scientific shock of its own that sent researchers and psychologists scrambling for answers. How could the unflattering statistics of Milgram's experiment have been so damning? The participants were normal, good individuals, just your average folk. They were not Nazis, were they? So how could their consciences permit them to torture and slaughter the innocent?
The answer is horse, 450 volts.
Scholars hotly contested the correlation between Milgram's experiment and the gassing of school children. Nevertheless, his experiment pounded on the walls of human self-reliance and exposed the fragility of a morality that is dependent on strictly mortal logic.